Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Or at least I think it does. See, I wasn't alive when the Sega Genesis came out, and I've actually never played any of Sega's consoles before. So that means I know absolutely nothing about this console. And if you are like me, or if you know everything, then follow me as we go on this journey to figure out the best drumming the Genesis has to offer. Sonic. Streets of Rage 2? Toe Jam and Earl? Target Earth? Oh god! Oh, not that one! These are just a taste of how brilliant the music can be on the Genesis. With Sega having the latest and greatest at the time, they were actually able to make the melodies and the drums sound like actual virtual instruments, instead of just pitch bends that were mimicking a drum sound. But hold on, before we can even talk about this console, we have to look at what came before it, which was the Master System.
The Sega Master System, with twice as much memory.
Oh, Dad?
Sega does it all! Well, except outsell Nintendo. The only difference between the Master System and the NES is that the NES had a triangle wave, which was used for creating its bass lines. Besides that, they both have 2 square wave channels and a noise channel for creating the drums. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, then that means you didn't watch my previous video on the drumming of the NES. What's wrong with you? The link's right there and down below, so now you have something to watch right after this video. Please don't click away. Sonic came out on both the Master System and the Sega Genesis, and you could hear just how much more the Genesis was capable of with Green Hill Zone. They both sound really good, but the Genesis just adds that much more with bringing the bass and the drums back into the mix. God, I never realized what I was missing with just how good some of the music sounds on the Genesis. And it's because of this little guy right here, the Yamaha YM2612. This chip gave the system 6 audio synthesizer channels, and because it's a Yamaha, that's the only thing you need to know on why everything sounded so damn good. You see, back in the 80s, every hit song used a Yamaha DX7 keyboard, which the Genesis chip is based on, to create those timeless keyboard sounds. And before you ask, yes, it was even used to create the greatest song of all time. Get rickrolled, nerd. Since the Genesis had 6 new audio channels to work with, this expanded the number of sounds that could be created and played at once. But that's not all. The madmen over at Sega even put the Master System chip in there. So with some intricate math, that means composers had 10 audio channels to work with. But by putting the Master System chip in the Genesis, that also gave Sega a gigantic advantage over Nintendo. This made the Genesis backwards compatible with its previous console. You know, something that you would include if you actually cared about your fans, and not just the money they can give you. Okay, now that all the technical stuff is out of the way, let's finally dive into the drumming of Sonic the Hedgehog. And let's start at the beginning. For this iconic track, the composer Masato Nakamura actually used a real Yamaha keyboard to compose the soundtrack for Sonic, and then he programmed it into the game. And that original composition sounds even better than I could have possibly imagined. With this visualizer behind me, we can actually break down and see exactly what is going on in this track. These bottom 3 tracks are all from the Master System sound chip, and these first 2 right here are just adding a little bit of flair to the melody, while this last one is constantly keeping time with the hi-hat. These other 6 channels above me are all from the Yamaha sound chip, And in the middle is the drums, right where they should be. The additions that the Genesis bring can really be heard once the hi-hat becomes the focus in Chemical Plant Zone. There's something I've noticed studying all these retro consoles, and that's a hi-hat pattern that's always found in the best tracks. It's just hi-hat triplets, but that's exactly what the track needs to add something subtle, but also fast. But how good is the soundtrack once you need to slow the pace down? To achieve that smooth, relaxing beat, the hi-hat and snare are just playing a simple pattern, with the feet helping to fill out the rest. The bass drum gets a lot more love in this track, but it's not just adding sporadic beats just because. Instead, it adds that musical flair that helps differentiate this track from the rest of them. So we now know that Sonic was the reason to own a Genesis. But does that automatically make it the best soundtrack? Well, it depends on who you ask, because some might say that crown belongs to Streets of Rage. This soundtrack is the perfect mix of techno and house music, and it's so good that the composer was even invited to nightclubs to DJ his own tracks. The reason that I love it is because the drums take center stage, especially in the boss theme. And what if we need to bring the energy down a little bit? Not every track needs to be dominated by the drums, and I personally think that this laid-back, consistent beat works the best for this occasion. Well, that's Streets of Rage's soundtrack, and while it is super catchy, I just want something heavier. I can't express to you how excited I got when I read the quote, "I want to make the world's first heavy metal game soundtrack." That was said by Toshiaki Sakota, and this man put in the legwork to make sure that his creation was everything that he wanted. This man was so dedicated to his craft that he actually spent a month creating an FM guitar sound and even created a modulation envelope to make it sound like a human was actually strumming that guitar. I'm not even entirely sure what that means. But what I do know is that it resulted in a kick-ass soundtrack. This heavy metal soundtrack that came out in 1990 was absolutely amazing to hear, because I didn't think heavy metal came to games until 1993 with Doom. But it's still not my favorite Genesis soundtrack. That belongs to the Japan exclusive Battle Mania. This soundtrack came out 2 weeks after Doom, and I think it sounds better. The synth just has that heavier tone, and with the drums, just listen for yourself. It also has the greatest mission clear music of all time. So what's the one thing that all of these games have in common? They were all made in Japan. There is a whole other side to the Genesis, and that's the games made in the U.S. They don't sound that good. No, this was the early 90s. Fucking Windows 95 wasn't even out yet. So that means the US and Japan had completely different machines, since there was no universal standards for computers yet. Let's look at the game Marble Madness, for example. It came to the Genesis in '91, and this is what it sounds like. Oh my god. Oh God, oh my God, turn it off. Why does it sound so bad? Oh, here's the problem. This same game came to Japan 2 years later, and it actually sounds how it's supposed to sound. This actually sounds the closest to the original, but there's also one more twist. The game was actually ported to the Master System in '92, and you have to hear how it sounds. Here goes nothing. That actually sounds pretty good. So why did the US release for the Genesis sound so bad? What the hell is GEMS? Genesis Editor for Music and Sound Effects was created to help the US developers actually create music for the Genesis. Marble Madness came out before this program was released, so that should explain why it sounded the way it did. With this new program, the games that released after it, they just have to sound good. Let's find out with the X-Men soundtrack. Oh my God! It sounds like Wolverine's trying to fight his way to the bathroom. Okay, not everything sounded good, but there was one Sonic game that actually used this program, and that blue hedgehog can't let me down now. Can he? Oh my God! Oh fuck no! Oh my God! I'll be honest, that was like the worst example I could find, but some of the tracks really aren't half bad. It's pretty good, but it just doesn't sound as iconic as the Sonic games that were made in Japan. Since the Genesis was actually created in Japan, the composers over there just had a better understanding of how to make the music work better than the US developers. The GEMS program did make the process of composing easier, but it could just never reach the greatness that was those Japanese soundtracks. Alright, so that's it for the Genesis. If Sega wasn't so frisky with it by constantly experimenting with these two toys in the bedroom, if you know what I'm saying. This image both truly terrifies and excites the collector side of me. I'm gonna save the 32X and the CD for next time, but now we finally arrived at the part you've all been waiting for, the ending drum montage. don't know, like and subscribe or some shit like that. I'm gonna go die now.